Hello. In this interview, I'll be getting the perspectives from Rebecca Yang, a female undergraduate student. Rebecca was previously a student in the database systems subject that I taught at the University of Sydney. She studied computer science at Sydney University and took electives at Toronto, Canada and Cambridge, UK. So she's had the experience of several different learning environments. So Rebecca, welcome, and thank you for agreeing to this interview.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, well, maybe you could just start by telling us a bit more about yourself and your background and how you ended up in the place that you are.
Right. So I am Rebecca, and I was born and raised in the Philippines. Came to Australia as a domestic student because, as I mentioned, my mum grew up in Perth. In 2016, where I started computer science, well, my degree in computer science at the University of Sydney. And prior to that, I didn't know anything at all about computer science and about programming. I didn't know anything. It was a complete blank slate. But yeah, now 5 years on, I will be working as a cloud engineer at Deloitte.
Fabulous. And so maybe I'm interested to hear how it felt. So you say you didn't have any experience with computing beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
What led you to that decision to do that course?
So it's actually a very funny story. So I before I moved to Sydney, I was actually in uni at the Philippines. So I was at University of the Philippines because as part of, they've since changed it, but when I graduated, we didn't have year 11 and 12. So you pretty much graduated at the age of 16 in year 10, then you go into uni for 4 years and you graduate at the age of 20, which is very young actually, now that I think about it. But so I was 16, graduated high school, and I thought initially that what I wanted to do was economics. I had this sense of like, I'm not sure what I want to do because I was pretty much a generalist in high school. I liked a lot of things, but I kind of wanted something which I felt like would allow me to have like a positive impact. And I thought, well, poverty is a problem in the Philippines. So I thought, well, maybe if I do economics, I could work for the government or something. That's what I thought. So I went to the University of the Philippines, studied economics, and I took this elective in my second semester that was actually electrical engineering. It was so hard. It was intro to electrical engineering, but it was so hard that most of us had an average of hovering just slightly above 50. And my professor, really not wanting to fail anyone, came up with this bonus project at the end of the semester and was like, all you have to do, it's a completely optional project, but all you have to do, but you should probably do it if you want to get a better grade, is write a review of any technical gadget and try to use as many technical terms as you can. So you can pick any technical, you can pick like a phone, for instance, a laptop, for instance, and you can talk about the RAM or whatever, and you can like compare and contrast different laptops and try to rate them on technical specs, and then just present it in any format you wanted. You could write it on a piece of paper, you could send a Word doc, you could use a PowerPoint, whatever you want really. Just do it to boost your grades. So I remember it was a bonus project and everyone thought it was kind of like a throwaway project. So most of my friends typed up a Word document, got it over and done with. But for whatever reason, I really mean for whatever reason, I don't really know how it occurred to me, but I thought I really wanted to stand out. And I thought, why not like make a website, like at least the front end of a website, and make it look like it's a website that like reviews gadgets. Didn't know anything about programming, but I sort of Googled a bit and I was like, oh, it turns out that just to do the front end, you can do HTML and CSS. And so that's exactly what I did. I didn't sleep for most of 2 weeks, just doing that and like kind of self-learning HTML and CSS as I went along. And in the end, I submitted this project that really was just HTML and CSS, just the front end of it. And I reviewed refrigerators, of all things. And I didn't hear back from my professor, didn't hear back any feedback. Prior to this, I think my average was probably 60, in the low 60s. But then all of a sudden, at the end of the semester, I found out that I had topped the course and I got 100, because I
Wow.
think my professor was, very blown away by the effort that I'd put in doing this, and I was the only one, I think, to have done HTML and CSS website. So he just overrode my score and just gave me 100. Um, so I think that I had this sort of little bit of a eureka moment of like, it's very fun to have something you can create and to be proud of, which I didn't really feel like I could do with economics. Like, you don't come up with a product per se.
Hmm.
So I got thinking about it, and then at some point I decided I wanted to transfer university because I wanted to, I wanted to be challenged and I wanted to go overseas. And so I applied to University of Sydney. I had visited years ago and I really, really fell in love with the campus. So I really only applied to University of Sydney. And at the time I thought, well, why not try putting computer science? I think there's something as well about like going to a country where you don't know anyone and no one knows you, that you feel like you're a blank slate and you can really do anything. I don't think I would have had the courage to do computer science if I'd stayed back home, because that wasn't at all my reputation at school. I wasn't known to be very, very good at computers or anything. So it was, to a lot of my friends' surprise when I said that I was going to be doing computer science. I think that was more surprising to them than the fact that I was moving. Um, One of my friends actually was like, she actually said, when I said, oh, I'm going to do computer science, she said, ew, you're not a computer nerd. And she said, I really remember that. I really remember those words because they were so discouraging. Um, but yeah, that, I think that was kind of how I found my way into it, and I guess I stayed on.
I can definitely relate to that sense of there being an opportunity for reinvention. Certainly in the UK system, you tend to study away from home, and often then you're away from all your school friends, and there is that opportunity to just be the new person, not have all the baggage of high school. So yes, so I like that. I like that sense. But then, so when you start at university and doing computer science, um, how did the experience meet up to your expectations?
Um, well, it was really, I really remember my first sort of freshman year. It was really, really, really challenging. So when I said I learned HTML and CSS, I really meant I was just copy pasting. And I look at that project now, I haven't touched it since, but it was very, very tricky. It wasn't at all elegant. But when I started computer science, I didn't know that a lot of people would be coming in with quite a solid background actually. And I guess I sort of assumed everyone would be like me, where basically zero experience. Um, but I think when I started in Sydney, that was very, very jarring. Like coming to into the programming and finding out that most of the people in my class had already learned at least Python or Java or something. Maybe not C. I mean, I actually knew people who already knew C when they were starting out, but I think most people at least had a very solid grasp, I think, of like basic programming concepts. And I was the only one who didn't. So it's really, really, really challenging starting out. And I can appreciate as well, like, if you are the unit coordinator for intro to programming, it's really hard to cater to, this, you're going to have a large group of people who've been doing this for a while and you want to make it challenging for them, but you also don't want to make it far too challenging for the people who hadn't done it before. And there would be a few of us. Although I think that was sort of, it felt to me like it was the minority. I don't know if it actually was, but so it was really, really, really challenging starting out. And I really didn't expect that there would be such a huge um, gap, honestly, in prior experience, which is not, I think it's very unique to computer science, don't you think? I don't see that, because it's like saying, someone doing chemistry, they wouldn't really, I mean, I don't know if this is a good example, but say, okay, my sister is doing nursing. You wouldn't really have prior nursing experience before you did your degree. Um,
No, I think also, I mean, actually, your suggestion of chemistry as an example is a good one, because um, I, I'm pretty sure that chemistry and many other sciences, what they say is, forget what you learnt at high school. It's all completely different now. We're going to teach you real chemistry or real physics, and that's not the case for computer science, I think. But I'm also interested, that idea that you were one of the few people that didn't know programming to the same level. I wonder how accurate that is, whether there might have been in reality like a silent majority of people who also felt that insecurity but don't voice it. It's sort of only the people that are confident who are
Yeah.
likely, I think, to broadcast that fact.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I thought about that after, because I certainly, um, I didn't broadcast it myself. I didn't have prior experience. And yet, I mean, you are right. Like, it's usually people who are, more confident, very knowledgeable, who would talk the loudest, if anything. So it could have as well been that. It could have been that um, it was the silent majority, but it just didn't feel that way at all to me. Um, I didn't know even what a variable was starting out. And like, I had friends who knew what recursion was starting out. So there was this huge sort of like gap in previous experience that I really felt, honestly, it was discouraging. It was really, really discouraging. And I had a lot of moments, even up until my second year, where I was asking myself, am I going to be playing catch up with these people for the rest of my career if I stay on this? And it was a very real question to me. Um, and I did at some point consider possibly shifting out, because I thought, well, if I'm going to be faced with such a disadvantage, like, what is the point of me staying this degree? Um, which, I mean, luckily I didn't. I stayed on, and I found out that I think in the latter part of my uni life, like, it's not at all like winning a programming contest or something. That's not what computer science was all about. But I think certainly for the first 2 years, that's what it felt like. And it can be quite lonely, because you do feel like you're the only one.
Mm. And do you think that maybe there's definitely a focus in pedagogically? Normally you try and teach programming. Often when people think about computer science or related disciplines, the focus often goes to programming, but there's a lot more to things than just programming. And I suppose, is there a risk, do you think, that too much emphasis is put on programming, such that you're judging yourself purely on this one skill?
Yeah, for sure. I think programming, obviously, it's part of it. If you end up as a software engineer, which a lot of people who do computer science end up doing, it is a huge part of it. But I also found that um, through through the other things I did, it wasn't the most important component. I think, if anything, I don't know if you disagree. I don't know if all of you would agree with this, but I think creativity and being able to think outside the box is probably more important if you want to be a technologist. For instance, I remember when I went to Toronto, and I did this research project, which was really just using. So my professor at the time had built this agent-based modeling software, which he was under the geography, I think, geography department, and he was using that to model geographic phenomena. And I remember I came into his research, and one thing that I wanted to do was find other ways to apply this same software. I mean, I could change this a little bit, and that would mean changing the Java code because it's written in Java. But I think the main issue for me at the time wasn't even changing the code anymore. It was, where else can I apply this and be sort of successful in it? And I ended up applying it in modeling this thing that the brain does, the adrenal pituitary gland, and the interaction between them, and using agent-based modeling software to do that. And the Java code at the time just became the least important thing. Um, it was really like the focus really when my research was, how do I translate this biological phenomenon into this sort of software? So I remember thinking that, like, that it ceased to become the most important thing. And I think even at I think through internships as well, like, I felt like, I think my real world experience sort of felt like programming was a means to an end, but it's not the most important thing. And there are other components like creativity, even people skills and communication and knowing how to work in a team. Those were also really, really important. So I do think that if, at uni, I certainly got the impression, I should say I did. I certainly got the impression that programming was the most important thing. And if you were the best programmer, then you would be very, very successful in your career. And I think, very luckily for me, doing sort of like internships and research and all the other extracurriculars that I did reinforced the idea that it wasn't actually.
I imagine that there's also, in terms of the population of people doing the same course, you know, that their programming appeals to people precisely because it doesn't have to involve people skills and things. So I imagine that some of those skills were less common
It
in
was
that cohort.
definitely not valued. I mean, I would say that I mean, you are right. I mean, I did feel that, you know, throughout my degree, those were the personalities that flocked to computer science because they just wanted to do programming. Those were the personalities that dominated the field. Um, and I certainly felt that I was the minority in that, and that that to me wasn't, I mean, I knew people who, you know, would do assignments and then after they submit assignments would like continue to code in their own personal projects or do, I knew people who wanted to be competitive programmers actually in their spare time, and that just wasn't at all me. And it, yeah, it felt very, very discouraging. And I remember telling my mum that there was something wrong with my personality. I definitely went through a phase where I felt like maybe like my personality didn't, this is a heavy word, didn't deserve to be in this field because it seemed like that's what you had to
Mm.
be good at this. That's what you had to be. You have to have this personality of, you know, thinking of programming is very, very important, and really, really loving programming to the point that you dream in code in your sleep or something to be successful in this field. And I didn't feel like I was like that. And I felt like because of that, I was never going to be successful in this field. Like I wasn't going to have a great career, or I wasn't going to be feeling fulfilled or something. So I definitely remember thinking that, because those are the people that you meet, those are the personalities that you see. Um, so yeah, to answer your question, yeah.
Well, then I mean, so on that point, then how much do you think that gender comes into play in those feelings, or that sense of being an outsider and all that whole box of emotions that were there?
It was definitely huge, and I think there's the psychological component. I think that, I mean, I think as a, I don't know if I can say this across the whole, you know, the whole gender, but like I think for me, I was reading somewhere that women can tend to um, internalize blame a little bit more. So there's a sense of, I don't know if it's nature or nurture, could be very much nurture actually, that, you know, when we say our code doesn't work, I was reading this in psychological paper somewhere that if our code doesn't work, a man might say, oh, my code doesn't work, there's a problem with my code. But a woman might say, I don't know if you read this as well, a woman might say, there's a problem with my code isn't working, there's a problem with me, I am a bad programmer. So I definitely felt that a lot. And I did notice that out of, well, most of my peers were guys anyway, so most of my peers were male, that nobody would internalize that much blame. And I would be, you know, in my group of friends, I internalized the most blame when my code didn't work. If my code crashed, I'd just be, okay, well, clearly I'm not good enough for this. But if their code didn't work, if they had a logic error or something, they would just, you know, keep going back and keep reiterating and keep compiling. And then if it didn't work, go back again. But I would need to take a step back, and I would think, oh, there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm not good enough for this. Maybe I'm not good enough for this. And again, like, I don't know if that's across, you know, the board for like all women, but I felt like that. And then reading that paper kind of reinforced the idea that it might have something to do with gender. But and it's also not just how you perceive yourself, it's also how others perceive you because you are a woman. So I did have, you know, projects that actually most of my group projects, I would be one of the only female or one of two. Um, and I definitely did feel that in some of them, not all of them, I had very happy groups in some of them, but I definitely felt that in some of them, I almost had to prove more that I could code. I can think of one project that, you know, we were grouped together, we didn't choose our group, and right off the bat, I was just told that I wasn't going to touch the code, that I was going to do PowerPoint right off the bat. So there's the way that you as a woman perceive the world and you perceive all of this, but there's also the way that others perceive you just because you are a woman. And I think that, you know, both those things can affect how, you know, your self-efficacy, how you feel, how successful you feel you can be in this field. and all that stuff. Because even if you believe in yourself, like even if you very, very, very much believe in yourself, like if other people aren't believing in you because you are a woman, then you're still not going to be successful. You're not going to be chosen for projects. You're not going to be chosen to do difficult, challenging projects and stuff like that. So I think
presumably that those two aspects, the sort of the internal and external, they feed on each other. So if you're feeling insecure, then you project insecurity, and other people may build on that. And if they're saying stuff to you, that's going to make you feel more insecure as well. So that sounds like a vicious cycle there.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think those two feed into each other. And even if, say, like, even if because when I still remember when I came in, I didn't have this, like, maybe I was just very, very shut in this way, but because I didn't really know anything about tech. Honestly, I didn't know anything about tech. I didn't have this expectation of, I'm not going to say all of my male peers, but some of my male peers assuming a certain way about me because I was women. I didn't know that was a thing at all. I didn't know that happened. So I really remember being almost shocked into it when I went in, where I would just get told that you do the PowerPoint, and I think that also might have started the insecurity of like, well, what's wrong with me? Why can't I touch the code? So it's like, even if like I think what I'm trying to say is, even if you come in and you're a black state as I was, and you don't think a certain way, you don't assume things about yourself because you're a woman, other people saying that to you does make you feel like you must therefore be worse. Not just capable.
And then, do you think that part of this is also then influenced by the teaching environment that was there something about the way in which the teaching environment was created, the way the lectures are run or the exercises are run, that compounded that problem?
I would say, yeah. I mean, it's really, really hard though, because I think one of the issues is that there's so much emphasis placed on programming, at least in the first 2 years. There's so much, like maybe in your third or fourth year, you get something more interdisciplinary, or you get something a bit more applied. But I think in your first and second year, like it's all you really do is code, 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 code. And then I think this kind of culture almost makes, I'm trying to choose my words, but it almost makes it like you do have to be this sort of person. And I mean, I'm not sure anymore if this has got to do with gender or just my personality. And I wasn't that person at all. And so people would have this notion of me, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like I would, I definitely had experiences where I would come in a group and felt that people assumed immediately that I couldn't do the work at all because, I was chatty, I was gregarious, and I got told this a lot, I didn't look computer science. And I don't really know what that means. Like, what does that mean? Like, what does looking like computer science mean? So I think I think the culture of like, okay, there being coding and, me not coming from a coding background, obviously not my strength. If you've had years and years of programming and I'm coming in and we're only assessed on this level of coding skills, like you would then win because I don't have this experience. I didn't code growing up. So I would say that yes, to an extent, like it does foster that, because you're only assessed on this thing. So you feel like that's the most important thing. And obviously, someone who's been programming for years and who loves to program in their spare time would have me beat. Because I do like programming in a sense that firstly, it's a means to an end. You can build a great product. But also secondly, it's nice in a sort of problem solving way. It's like a little puzzle. But I wasn't also the type to keep doing it in my spare time. And I felt like that was taken to be a weakness.
Right, yeah. So building on that idea of there being maybe things that were not, the environment which the teaching was done might not have sort of been well suited, what would you change about the way in which a computer science course or a whole degree is structured? Are there things that could improve particularly for girls, I suppose, or women?
I think I think something that was interesting to me is I didn't have very many female academics in my first and second year. I think it was in my third year that I had a female lecturer. Um, and I think I've only had one or two female tutors. So that, I think that does if you are already coming from a place of like a bit of like insecurity, um, it doesn't help that you don't see yourself there, because then you think, well, maybe it's because people like me aren't successful in this field or shouldn't be in this field. Um, so I think a little bit more diversity would be quite interesting, and certainly not just across gender, but across and sexual orientation for that matter, but also across, you know, races, like backgrounds. That would be, I think that would make it more feel more welcoming, really. Um, I also think that it can be, it can feel a bit exclusive if a lot of, I just remember there being sort of a number of references to like gaming stuff
Mm.
that I didn't understand. And it can feel quite alienating if that's like, because I don't remember what game it was, but I remember there was this game that was referenced in a few of, in a bunch of courses, and all my a lot of my male peers would get the joke, and I didn't get the joke at all. And it can feel a bit alienating again, reinforcing this idea of this is the identity that you have to succeed. Um, and I think from the side of like from the computer science curriculum side, I think it'd be really, really interesting to have a more, again, this is coming from my experience, not as an educator, but as a student of, it would be more interesting to see diversity, because if most of your courses are programming in the first 2 years, a lot of people, I did know a few people who dropped out because they assumed that this is the part of it, so that applies to the whole. First 2 years are all programming, the next 2 years are also going to be programming.
Mm.
So a lot of people don't stick around long enough to find out that actually it's very, very interesting what you can do with this. A lot of people just think, well, it's just coding, it's very dry, it's not what I want to do. I knew a number of people who felt that way. So I think having more diversity, I think in courses where the emphasis is not so much on like be a great programmer almost on a competitive level, but just being a little bit more holistic and well-rounded, would be interesting. Something that I really, really liked in Toronto was actually they had a lot of interdisciplinary courses. I'm not sure why, but they had a lot of courses that like you can take. So their first year was very much like programming, but then from the second year onwards to the fourth year, they usually have 4 years degree there. It's very interdisciplinary. So I took a course that was cognitive science, but it was like, so our lectures were all cognitive science, but all our assignments were coding. But you're coding in order to find the answer to a specific question in cognitive science. So we'd be given large data sets, and we'd have, you know, Python, Jupyter notebooks, and we just code there, find a solution, type up a report that was sort of cognitive science related. I just remember that was a light bulb moment for me, actually, of like, this is very interesting when we apply coding to another field and we can find answers in another field. It's very, very, very interesting, because prior to that, I really just thought computer science was all about solving problems. Maybe this is stupid, but I really thought computer science was about solving problems in computer science. It's about developing the best algorithm. It's about networks and all of that. But that was the first time for me to see it actually applied to another field, and it was so incredibly interesting. So I
That's
think having more
interesting. Sorry.
courses.
I was just to say that it's interesting you say that, because a lot of the research on the research side in computer science has traditionally been in the, you know, like, well, algorithms and very sort of pure work, and it's more recently that the things have moved back to the applications, and, you know, people talk about data science and multidisciplinary subjects. So those are actually very relevant, you know, that those experiences are very relevant to the demands in modern research, I think. But
I mean, even in algorithms. So I also had this idea that algorithms was this very, very pure maths thing. It's about proofs. It's about you know, finding out the best way to do something, which is always awfully clever. That's always how I felt. I liked algorithms in the sense that I always felt like something it was very cleverly done, but it did feel like, you know, algorithms was optimizing algorithms and stuff. But it was, again, with algorithms, it was only in Toronto when I did this algorithms and game theory course that I felt like it was so interesting, like seeing the applications of algorithms in another field, in game theory, which was also very challenging, was very interesting to just, sit there and think about. And it was a very challenging course, but again, it was the first time that I had seen algorithms applied elsewhere, and I felt like that made for more interesting study, if anything. Um, so that was something I felt, and I even feel like, from an industry standpoint, now that I'm heading to industry and I've completed several internships, um, I think a lot of the very interesting innovations that will happen in computer science will be driven by necessity in other fields. So in healthcare, for instance, which is what I'm sort of becoming very interested in, health tech, like a lot of, there's a lot of work to be done in that field. And I do think that a lot of the innovation will come from technology. But also a lot of innovation in technology will come from the necessity, it being necessitated by issues in other disciplines,
I
is
suppose
what
it
I
shouldn't be forgotten that computer science emerged from an external need. It was very much a science that grew out of a particular application, and so perhaps it's become a bit too introspective, and it's having to remind itself of its roots a bit there.
even from a university standpoint, it would be interesting to do that, because something that one of my professors, again in Toronto, that I remembered him saying at the end of the course was, so he taught us computer design. I can't remember. I just remember having to do Java in his class. Can't remember what the course he, but it was very much a programming course. But I remember he said something like, computer science, like, it's a discipline, and there's a difference between taking computer science at university and taking it in a boot camp for 6 months, where you come out and you can be full stack. And you're saying, computer science, because computer science, it's not about coding, it's not about programming, it's a discipline, it's a way of thinking, it's, having this innovation and really entrepreneurial mindset, and being very innovative and being creative. And that is not something that a boot camp can teach you. The boot camp will teach you the language, they will teach you, very industry applied stuff. But hopefully, which is what you're saying, hopefully university will teach you that it is more, that it is a discipline, it's a way of thinking, and it's being creative and problem solving. And I think about that still sometimes, because I think it's not emphasized enough sometimes at university. It's like the emphasis is always coding, coding, coding. But then what happens is, and I've at the companies I've worked at, I've met people who it was a rude awakening for them to, do very well in uni, do very well in the programming classes, but then graduate. And because a lot of these people, I'm not going to say all, but a lot of the ones I knew were very good at working with themselves and not very collaborative. Then they go to industry and they realize that it is far, far, far too big for them to do by themselves. And they often have to work in a team. And there's many other things. It's not just about programming at that point. And it's a rude awakening for them, actually, that part. So I think it would be good to emphasize on like other skills and not just programming, because I don't think that's what computer science is all about either. It's a big part of it, I agree. It's the way a lot of things get built, but it's not computer science in its entirety. One of the things that I really enjoyed, I remember, was an assignment I did in AI for Irene, actually. I think this is her standard assignment, which was the diabetes assignment. I don't know if you're familiar.
I've not read
But
that one.
I think she does that. I was talking to, it's like Chris Atoli. I was talking about it with someone before, and he was saying, yeah, she seems to do that every time she teaches AI. Like that's the final assessment, where we get given like a data set, and then we have to use, I think it was supervised learning. And it was really, really interesting to me. That assignment actually got my attention. Like, it wasn't an assignment, because a lot of times I think with programming, you do feel like the sense is just to be a better programmer or to learn a specific algorithm. So I don't really do it with excitement. Like, it's just, I feel like, okay, the point for me is to learn, and I'm going to learn as much as I can. But that was one of the first assignments that I had, where I was actually very, very interested in the result. And I actually really, really felt inspired to like code better, to do better, because there was it almost felt like there was a real world implication. And that to me was really important, seeing the connection between coding and the real world, because oftentimes like coding has this reputation, I think, for being a little bit far removed from society. I think certainly, there's a stereotype, there's a Hollywood stereotype at least of like coders being just in their own world, in the basement, just coding somewhere. It's far removed from society. I don't feel that way. I think coding is quite fun. I don't do it in my basement, certainly. But I think it does help when there's you see like the real world implication of what you do. It is very inspiring, and it does encourage you to be better, because you think like, I'm actually making a difference, at least to me. I'm sure it's not universal experience.
Well, let me thank you for a lot of interesting reflections there. I wanted to cap that off by then just asking you, what advice would you give if you were to go back in time and meet your younger self and not annihilate yourself in some sort of cosmic event? But if you could go back and give some advice to yourself before you'd started your university, your degree, what would you say?
Honestly, I think it's just, well, maybe two things actually. I think the first one is not to let the perspective of other people cloud your judgment. So, if you want to do something, you shouldn't feel like you shouldn't because you're not smart enough or something. Because I think definitely that also stopped me from pursuing computer science earlier. That I felt like that this is not my reputation. I'm not smart enough. I just remember when I was applying for university, for the first time in the Philippines, I just looked at all the degrees, and you're supposed to tick the ones you're interested in. Looked at all the degrees, and they were organized by faculties. Just covered engineering, just covered science, and just looked at like business and arts, because I felt like, I don't know, I felt like, well, that's my reputation. I liked English literature; that was my favorite class. I liked history, and I'm not a smart enough math or science person to do engineering science. Just covered it. And so I think going to Sydney was really a blessing, because like you said, you do feel empowered to reinvent, and that's the only time where I did computer science. So I think, and then even when I was doing computer science, this sense of like being discouraged because I would get told off, or someone would make a not very nice offhand comment to me, or someone would say, yeah, you can do the PowerPoint, please don't touch the code. That's happened. And that definitely made me feel, like I didn't deserve a place here, that I shouldn't be here, that I wasn't smart enough to be here. So I think just being able to put blinders on sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, and just listen to what you want and what you think you're capable of, and just going for it is one of the things. But I also think the second one is to be more, I would probably tell myself to be patient, because I think I was very, very, very challenged picking up programming for the first time, picking up algorithms for the first time. And programming it's like maths. It's like doing a math problem. Like you have to get good at it, and you have to keep doing it again, and you do drills and all that. And I think it was very, very frustrating for me to see, my classmates being able to finish their assignments much, much, much faster than I could, and me just feeling like, why can't I think of the solution faster? So there's patience on that front, but there's also patience on like, computer science getting interesting front, because I felt like the first 2 years were programming, which I felt like were not terribly interesting. And it would have been, and I think it took 2 years for me to finally get to more sort of I say this with some hand waving, real world stuff, seeing the implications and the relevance to society. Because I think for the first 2 years, it wasn't apparent what the impact of this was on society. So I think that was very important to me. So it took 2 years. So I think I tell myself to be patient. Just work hard, work at it. It doesn't matter how long it takes if for you to learn, for you to really understand what a loop is. I still remember that. I still remember having a hard time with that. You'll get there, but also just be patient in terms of like the whole, on a bigger scale of like seeing the impact that you can make, because it's computer science really, really, I have to think, I mean, it might be biased, but out of all fields, really has the capacity and the potential to make really big impact. So I think I would say that.
Well, it sounds like you somehow managed to have both the patience and the resilience to get through. So well done on both counts.
Thank you. It wasn't easy, but I'm glad I did it. It's turned out to be so rewarding. I think, which is why I really hope that more people do computer science, even if that might not be, you might not have grown up in a coding family learning how to code, um, or maybe you didn't get to pick it up, what's it called, in HSC or something. Like I wish more people would give computer science a chance, because I think for one, computer science could really, I think the field could really benefit from having such a more diverse perspective. And at the end of the day, I really see it as a tool for like solving problems, for solving most of the problems actually that we see today. I think like technology is going to have such a huge hand in solving the world's most pressing problems. So I really wish that like people would give it more of a chance. I mean, I came to computer science because I realized I did this one little project, and then I realized that like you could do so much with it. You can build whatever you want. And if a civil engineer builds a bridge, his work would impact people who use that bridge every day, which is great impact. But if you do computer science and you, I don't know, build an app or something, you could release it in your basement, and someone from a part of the world that you've never been to could be using that app, and it could be benefiting him. So yeah, I think I really wish that like more people would give computer science a chance, and like think of it as a, it's a problem solving way. It gives you the tools to create and to bring to life what you imagine, and not have that perspective, as opposed to like, oh, computer science, oh, all coding and full of like a certain personality or whatever. I don't know what the stereotypes are anymore, but I just wish that more people would give it a chance, really.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad that you're providing an alternative to that stereotype.
Thank you.